So while Mike Lindstrom is calling in, I will go ahead and get started. First, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm excited about this webinar because I think it is a topic that is incredibly, what everyone would say is a hot topic right now and something that needs to be addressed. So we have two wonderful speakers. Dr. David Dahmi is an addiction medicine and anesthesiologist. He is the founder and medical director of my MAT clinic. And he will go in and explain a little bit more about how that relates to this topic as we speak. And then the speaker that we're waiting for is Mike Lindstrom, who is a worldwide speaker and business coach. He is an author and certified speaker for Vistage Worldwide, and has worked very closely with Clark and Levy as a business coach as well. So why don't we start out? Let's first do a poll and just kind of see where everybody is with kind of what stressors that they're personally dealing with in this during this time in this pandemic. So I'm going to launch our poll here. Excellent. So looks like the two biggest stressors are the fear of catching COVID-19 and social isolation. Both are topics that we will be discussing today. So let's see here. So David, I know we're still waiting for Mike, but as we're waiting for him, why don't we get started a little bit on what kind of your background and what your experience has been with this.
Yeah, hi, my name is David Dahmi, and as Jennifer mentioned, I'm an anesthesiologist by training originally, and then I started practicing addiction medicine about 9 or 10 years ago, and I live in Orange County in Southern California, where we have quite a big problem with substance use disorder, especially opiate use disorder, as does the rest of the country. And so now I split my time evenly between addiction medicine and anesthesiology. And I work with Mike Lindstrom as well in a number of capacities. And he was pointing out to me that, the third Monday of January is regarded as sort of a low point for people nationally for a number of reasons. So we kind of hatched this idea that we would do sort of a webinar for your HR firm to help employers maybe better understand why that is and some of the things that they can do or their employees can do to sort of counteract some of the depression that they're feeling around this time of year. And so that was sort of the basis of this talk. With regards to the work I do with people who are in substance use and how that substance use disorders and how that correlates, more than 50% of people that suffer from substance use disorders also have a mental health, at least one co-occurring mental health issue at the same time. And so although we use medications, to stabilize patients initially and help them transition from active drug or alcohol use to not using, what sustains their recovery are behaviors and habits and behaviors that are sort of promote a better quality of life. And they happen to be the exact same behaviors that everybody can use and should use to feel better and improve their mental health and their physical well-being. So that was the basis of this. And the way it was supposed to go is Mike and I were supposed to be talking to each other because we've done this before. But we'll just make do with Jennifer and myself for now, and hopefully Mike can call in.
Excellent. So talk to us a little bit about, signs that somebody might be feeling that they're struggling and going through kind of maybe struggling getting out of bed or, and what types of things should they be focused on?
Yeah, so just backing up a little bit, some of the statistics that I was looking at is that as far as in American business, there's about a 300 billion loss every year due to stress-related and mental health-related absenteeism. It's about a million work days a year. And America over the last 20 years has had about a 33% increase in depression and anxiety. And so we as a culture in particular have a hard time with stress, and it only seems to be getting worse. And so stress, when it goes from being sort of acute, which can be healthy, like dealing with, some type of situation where you need to have stress in order to get through it, when it goes from acute stress to chronic stress, it leads to a whole bunch of problems. And these are the problems that we're talking about in terms of they manifest themselves emotionally as depression and anxiety in most people. And so types of behaviors that we start to see people exhibit are sort of lack of motivation, lack of energy. They tend to isolate. Anger can become something that's increasingly common. So these are signs that somebody you care about or that you yourself maybe are starting to have more than a normal amount of chronic stress.
All right, great. And as an employee, what are things that you can be doing to make sure that your employer is aware of the situation? What can you be doing to help fight or work through these periods of time?
Yeah, as an employee, I mean, you need to advocate for yourself and go seek ask for help essentially. And a lot of people are really hesitant to do so out of sort of fear or shame. But most employers or HR departments have a mechanism whereby people can access help, and it can be done in sort of an anonymous and in a private way. And if you don't want to go to your employer, there are numerous resources that people can access to ask for help and be connected with certain types of treatments, behavioral or otherwise. The website I send a lot of people to is SAMHSA, SAMHSA. That's the Human Health Services Organization for the United States. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Agency for the United States, and that website has sort of a ton of resources for people to access.
All right, great. And as an employer, I would think it would be extremely important if you're noticing that your employees are feeling this way is to reach out, connect with employees. Do you have any experience with employers who have done that and kind of that connection with their employees and how that helps them?
Yeah, I mean, that's not necessarily like something that I have a lot of experience in. At my hospital, though, there are all kinds of initiatives that the employer makes possible for nurses and staff and doctors that work at the hospital. They have apps that they use. They have various sort of incentivization programs for people to exercise and to compete with one another, in a friendly way to sort of like improve how much they're moving during the day and to engage in certain types of strategies that they make available to people to help improve their mental health. But I've talked to, in my clinic, because that's not exactly the work I do from an employer standpoint. I talk to people about like, what are the behaviors that people can engage in that counterbalance or act against stress. And the first thing we usually do is we just talk about, okay, and this is for people who are in recovery predominantly, but again, it can be used for everyday people who don't have substance use disorders as well, because mental health is so prevalent amongst the general population as well. So what happens when acute stress becomes chronic stress is it all comes down to sort of neurotransmitters and neurohormones that are being produced by your brain. And the ones we know all about, are the fight and flight hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline, or neurotransmitters rather, and then hormones like cortisol are released. When these are released chronically or sort of over time, they lead to all kinds of physical and mental health problems for people. So what we talk about is like, what are the behaviors we can do to help combat, these chronic stress hormones and neurotransmitters. And so my talk today was going to be on 5 behaviors that everybody pretty much, at least some of them for sure, but you probably don't know why you should be doing them, and how people can, well, so to help people understand why they're important and how they all kind of actually work with each other to produce lower levels of stress and higher levels of happiness. So this is the sort of mind-body connection, right? So your mind is capable of producing a lot of scenarios that are fearful or stress producing, and when it happens too frequently or becomes chronic, then you manifest both mentally through having anxiety and depression, or physically through high blood pressure, diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease. And one that people are, particularly worried about right now is immune function. Chronic stress severely decreases your immune function's ability to fight infections like viruses and bacteria. So I can go through the sort of 5 behaviors, and we can
That would
talk.
be great. We have a poll of asking people. Let's see. Let's get our poll up here to find out what people are currently doing for the different what they do to combat kind of the winter blues. So we'll launch that now and see what people are doing, and then see how close to what they should be doing.
Somebody mentioned human contact in the form of hugs produces oxytocin. I love that. That's absolutely correct. Oxytocin is one of our feel-good hormones that the body releases. All right. Well,
what people can be doing.
Actually, exercise was number 1, and everybody kind of probably rolls their eyes and says, "Yeah, I know exercise is good for me, but it's hard for me, or I have a hard time making that a priority." So we'll talk about why, what the science behind it and the clinical evidence behind it. And there are a number of studies that I quote in particular that are sort of the basis of this, where they took groups of people who met criteria for clinical depression, and they randomized them to an exercise group, a medication group, which is like SSRI medications are the #1 medicine used to treat depression, and they're called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And they're one of the most widely prescribed drugs in the United States to help people with depression. And then there was another group that received just placebo, so like fake medicine. So anyways, the outcomes of this were that moderate exercise for 45 to 60 minutes, 3 times a week or more, was equally as effective as taking a pill for depression. Okay, but the long-term outcomes were better, because when you stopped taking the medication, your depression came back most of the time. Whereas the people who had been exercising, if they stopped exercising, they had an effect, sort of an antidepressant effect that lasted months. So there was a considerable sort of benefit when you compared pills to antidepressant pills to exercise. But then it goes beyond that, because there are no side effects of exercise versus taking medications have all kinds of potential side effects. And then there was one additional benefit that's obvious, is that exercise promoted physical health as well, whereas the medication did not, right? So you were lowering your blood pressure, you were producing endorphins, which made you feel good. It promoted sleep, which is the #2 on my list, by the way. And you lost weight. And so it's kind of like this upward spiral of, like, it had all these additional benefits above and beyond just improvement in your depression. So, and the key takeaway is 45 minutes to an hour, at least 3 times a week, and it has to be, moderately intense. And it doesn't happen right away. Just as SSRI medications don't instantly work and don't instantly make you feel better, they take weeks for the sort of chemical changes to begin to be of enough, of a great enough magnitude to subjectively notice an improvement. So people have to be patient with that.
And does it matter if somebody's going out running, or if they're lifting weights, or if they're, playing out in the yard with their kids?
These were cardiovascular. These were moderate cardiovascular types of things, but you can design whatever kind of workout you need to meet sort of a moderate cardiovascular exertion goal in terms of elevating your heart rate. And as far as resources go, you can go on the internet and find tons and tons of resources with regards to how to structure that kind of a program.
Okay, and just to bring it back to the employer side, employers could also do, I know there are things like walking meetings, or right now with everybody working from home, people can certainly do a conference call or talk to an employee over the phone. And would those types of activities also be helpful for an individual?
Yeah, like we were talking about a few minutes ago, our hospital has actually built a circuit, a sort of a course through the hospital, and nurses on their breaks are routinely going in 2s and 3s around the hospital, racking up, they're counting their steps and they're racking up points, and then they earn rewards, in terms of sort of small financial incentives and things to engage in these activities and make them habits.
I definitely have seen that as well. I've worked with a client that had contests where they would put their employees in groups, random groups, and at the end of the week, whichever team had the most points would get like a healthy lunch option paid for by the company.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all about aligning sort of incentives and making it fun for people, right? And again, with absenteeism being what it is due to stress-related illness, I mean, that's real in terms of financial cost to companies, in terms of loss of productivity. So again, I'm not the expert on this. This is what Mike talks about, how to do it. I just know that it exists and it's very effective if you make it fun and you align your incentives with your employees' incentives.
Excellent. So exercise is number 1, and you said sleep is number 2?
Yeah, and this is just a random order I put them in. There's not one more important than the other. Sleep is number 2 on my list, and everybody's like, yeah, of course, sleep. I should get more sleep. But this last year, I've been kind of blown away by how important. I had no idea how important sleep was in terms of human functioning. Being a doctor, I can remember competing with my medical student friends and residents to see who could get the least amount of sleep and still function the next day, as if it was some kind of like, badge of honor or whatnot. But I don't think I fully appreciated what a catastrophe that is for your body. And so, just as a background, every organism, every species has some form of sleep as part of its makeup. Okay, and so evolution has determined that sleep is so important, serves such a vital biological role in the survival of animals, that it's something that without it, you die, essentially, or all species die without sleep. However, when you're sleeping, you're not doing other things that promote your survival. You're not getting food, you're not procreating, you're not defending your family or your offspring, so you're vulnerable to predation. So again, it's something that's been built into us genetically over millions and millions of years. But only in the last 100 years, with sort of the Industrial Revolution and the ability to have like 24-hour-a-day light and access to things, has sleep been so increasingly compromised by people. And people are the only species that basically will trade sleep off in order to go do something else. No other species do that. So that's the problem, is that increasingly our society is prioritizing sleep or getting less and less sleep, and the effects of this are devastating. Sleep is the time of day where your body is doing a myriad of processes that are involved in creating balance and regulation within your body. And there's a British scientist named Dr. Matthew Walker, who runs the Berkeley Sleep Lab. He came out with a book last year called Why We Sleep. And this is the book I read during COVID, because I had no idea that sleep was one of the main things that is very, very important for proper immune function. And one of the things I saw in the book is, in the sleep lab, if you take somebody and you deprive them of 24 hours of sleep, you decrease their natural hunter T cell function by about 80%. And those are the immune cells that are running around your body all day long, looking for things that are bad. They're looking for bacteria, looking for viruses, but more importantly, they're looking for precancerous cells. So your body's making cancer kind of all the time, or as an accident, there's precancerous cells, and these T cells go out and they find and they kill those before they propagate into like a real tumor. So by not sleeping and not getting adequate sleep, and when I say that, I mean specifically two types of sleep: REM sleep and slow wave sleep. Those are ones that are so vitally important to you functioning well and recovering. By not getting that, your immune system is being just smashed. And as a matter of fact, the World Health Organization considers shift work, people that stay up overnight, probably a natural human carcinogen. So that's how serious sleep is in terms of your immune function. But it's also incredibly important with regards to your mental health. It dramatically decreases stress hormones and improves the hormones like oxytocin and growth hormone that you need in order to function well. It improves dopamine in your brain, which is the most important neurotransmitter in terms of energy and motivation. These things all become restabilized and regulated during a proper night's sleep. And so people not getting enough sleep is one of the most detrimental things they can do to their mental and physical health.
And what types of things if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I have a tough time falling asleep, or I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't get back to sleep, what are types of tips that you would give to somebody to help them have better sleep and be able to get into those different REMs?
So sleep is just like exercise in terms of behaviors. You have to go about it, planning it out ahead of time, right? So we use the term sleep hygiene all the time, and what that means is, what are your sort of behaviors that you do during the day and towards the end of the day that are going to increase the likelihood of you getting to sleep on time and staying asleep. And these things don't change like that. I mean, you have to basically work on them. But what people tend to do in the evenings that is not sleep promoting are obvious things like having sugar, drinking caffeine. Alcohol is actually terrible for sleep. People think that alcohol helps them sleep, but in the sleep lab, what we see with alcohol is that although you might become unconscious, it creates fragmented sleep. You don't get the deep restorative sleep, the slow wave sleep, and the REM sleep. It destroys your sleep architecture. So people, pass out or go to sleep easier, but the type of sleep they're getting isn't the good kind of sleep that promotes recovery. Screen time. Everybody knows that being on your phone, in the evening or around bedtime is not good for sleep, but they do it anyway. And it's a double whammy thing. So there's the blue light, which affects your circadian rhythm. it actually affects the release of melatonin and it delays onset of sleep up to several hours. Number one. Number two, the types of things that people are doing on their phone at night are often anxiety provoking. And we'll talk about social media here in a minute, but the long and the short of it is it's not the time of day to check your social media feed or your news feed or to read about, what's going on in politics or, COVID. I mean, these things are all incredibly anxiety producing, and they're not conducive to falling asleep. So those are some of the things to avoid. Some of the things that promote sleep. Exercise is a huge promoter of sleep, but you don't want to be exercising too late into the day because that can actually kind of rev you up and keep you from falling asleep. Timing your meals and the type of meals you eat are also important in falling asleep. Eating too late is not a good idea. So again, I won't go into every single little thing, but you can go online and you can look up sleep hygiene and what are basic things that people should be doing to help improve their sleep. And again, I'll say one last thing. Sleeping pills, same as alcohol. They destroy, they're not real sleep. Sometimes you need them if you're in an acute crisis, right, to just calm down, but ultimately they affect your sleep architecture and they fragment your sleep. So.
All right, great. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. That's super helpful. So we have 2 of the 5. So I'd love to hear some more.
Yeah, so this one again is obvious to people, especially if COVID hasn't highlighted this, then nothing will. So humans need meaningful human interaction. We are sort of genetically programmed to be, for a better term, pack animals. And when we are not together in a meaningful way with people we care about and love or are friends with, it causes us stress. The flip side of that coin is isolation is associated with much higher levels of depression, substance use, suicide, anxiety. So again, on the outside of this, you said, what are some of the signs that somebody's not doing well? Well, isolation is definitely one of them. And unfortunately, COVID has forced people into isolation. And in the substance sort of addiction community, substance use disorder community, when somebody starts to isolate, that's almost always a giant red flag for an impending relapse if it hasn't already happened. So what types of interaction do people need? Well, face-to-face or in person is by far and away the best. Okay. However, if you can't have that because you're separated or quarantined, something like we're doing right now is absolutely better than nothing. It's better than isolation. And to take it one step further, what's been shown to make people very, very happy is if they engage in activities that directly benefit others. So by helping other people, and like, I'm not talking something small, I'm talking like purposeful engagement in a way that improves somebody else's circumstances, has been shown to produce some of the highest levels of happiness for the actual giver. And of course, the receiver of the help is benefiting as well. So I know people know that helping others is kind of a good idea, but having a plan where you do it like on a regular basis, in whether it's through a church or in some other capacity, will definitely improve your own well-being and sense of purpose and connectedness.
I think that's a great point. I've also seen, opportunities where people can teach English online, different things like that, where if they're in a situation where they're not able to go out or don't want to go out and be close to people physically, that there's still that opportunity to do something charitable online.
That's a great point. Again, there's no shortage of things that you can get involved in that are already structured for you to donate some of your time and or expertise. to help other people who are in a less fortunate situation. One of the things that sort of correlates to exactly what we're talking to is we all know people that are struggling, because of COVID or with mental health issues or whatever. Simply picking up the phone and asking how you can help and being serious about it can get the ball rolling for you to have a real impact for people. A lot of people just don't know where to start, and starting is always the hardest thing with any of these things. So but it's clear that societies that are culturally very integrated and have a lot of tradition, and there's sort of a hierarchical distribution between the great grandmother, the grandmother, the mother, the child. Those folks live much longer, have much less disease, have much less mental health problems than societies that tend to isolate and don't have these types of cultural connectedness between people. So, and that just goes back to, that's just the way we're genetically wired.
And I would say as an employer, one of the things that I have certainly encouraged my clients to do is to really be reaching out to their employees, either both their peers as well as the people who report into them on a very regular basis. So maybe they connected prior to COVID on a weekly basis or a daily basis that they might have seen them, is to keep that type of connection happening, even if it's over the phone. Video is great. Most companies have some type of video, and that's even better. But if that isn't an option, to make sure that you're still reaching out to your employees and peers almost as regularly as you would if you were in the office with them.
Great. Excellent. So number 4. Yeah?
Yeah.
This one is possibly controversial, but it's consume less social media and news. And I think, we've become a culture that's addicted to our phones, and that we need this constant reinforcement. I mean, you stand in line at Starbucks and you watch people, and the minute they're bored, they pick up their phone, and the thing that they're probably looking at is either some news feed or social media feed. Well, in 2019, I went to the California Society of Addiction Medicine conference, and this sort of keynote speaker showed us in no uncertain terms that the parts of your brain that are involved when you form an addiction to an illicit substance are identical to the parts of your brain that form an addiction to social media. And under functional MRI, where we look at the parts of the brains that are lighting up, there's no difference. So what I'm saying is that social media, certain apps in particular, the ones that are designed with two-way communication features have been gamified by the creators of these apps to take advantage of the cognitive vulnerabilities that people have. And that's where things like the like button come from, and these sort of intermittent reinforcement is the term. It's the same strategy that slot machines use to keep people playing slot machines. The folks that develop these apps are well aware of like the human vulnerability to these tricks, if you'll call them. And their goal is simple. Their goal is to basically keep you engaged as frequently and as long as possible on your device, because they can monetize it. And that's the truth. And so what it means for people, in short answers, it's increased anxiety and depression dramatically. The younger that you are, the worse it is as well. Adolescents in particular are extremely vulnerable, and suicide rates and attempted suicide rates amongst adolescents and young adults have increased dramatically in the last 10 years. It all directly correlates with sort of the handheld technology revolution and apps becoming prevalent, more and more prevalent, but also more and more sort of insidious in how much of your time they consume and what kinds of information you're getting from them. So the long and the short of it is they're major stressors, and if you're using them at night, it's going to definitely impact your sleep. And so I talk to all my patients about this. I'm like, I know this is a form of reinforcement for you, but at some point the reinforcement becomes negative. It's no longer like serving you well. And so the strategies and techniques for this, when you're aware of it, are simply to put your phone away for an hour a day, not to take it into your bedroom at night, to turn it off when you're getting ready to go to bed more than a few hours ahead of time. And recently a movie came out called The Social Dilemma. It talks about exactly this in no uncertain terms, and it was the most downloaded movie in Netflix history in the first month. And the producers had it released in like 130 languages.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a very important movie to see. The Great Hack is another one. These are movies that sort of show what the underlying motivations of the producers of these social media apps is. So I encourage people just to recognize that although it feels good, it can become an addiction. And like anything else, if you use it too much, it'll probably decrease your quality of life.
And is there, most of us are working on computers during the day. Is the interaction that we have with our computers for work the same type of interaction that we have with social media? Assuming that our work is not on social media.
Yeah, unfortunately, partly so. There's a continuum, there are apps on your phone that are not associated with any of the things I'm talking about, and they tend to be this one-way apps, things like music apps or Calm or, meditation type of apps.
Okay.
But Gmail is one of the most addictive or email rather, is one of the most addictive things that we engage in. We get very, very caught up with checking our email. We get into habits where we get into an email conversation with somebody, where then you're waiting for them to respond to you, and so you're it's sort of the same kind of intermittent reinforcement type thing, and that's kind of built into Gmail as well. Google wants you to be using Gmail all day long.
Yeah, so something employers could do is really encourage their employees to, check email first thing in the morning, maybe before lunch,
yeah, that's called batching.
After lunch, and batch their emails. So
that's right. That's a well-promoted technique, not to sort of use email effectively. Tristan Harris, who's sort of the star in this movie, The Social Dilemma, he worked for Google, and he talked about sort of his addiction to Gmail and how he kind of came to this epiphany of like, oh my gosh, I'm spending all my time being consumed by Gmail, and it's done by Google on purpose.
So we have a question here. If you're going to be on your phone, is it better to play a game versus scrolling through social media, such as Candy Crush versus Instagram? Or in the long run, are they equal in the issues that they cause?
Candy Crush was the third most, the app that was associated with the third most anxiety and depression. And I don't play Candy Crush, so I don't really know why that is. But there was sort of like a good app category and a bad app category. And the bad app category had Candy Crush, was very, it produced a lot of, it was very addicting. Clearly the makers of Candy Crush know what buttons to push, in your subconscious to keep you engaged in Candy Crush, and but it was associated with unhappiness. Facebook, when they took groups of users on Facebook and they had them use Facebook for 14 days and rate their life satisfaction before and after, nearly everybody after 14 days had a lower level of life satisfaction. Instagram fell into that category. Tinder was really bad. So those weren't the ones that were associated with improving happiness.
All right, great. So the four, just a quick recap before we go on to number 5. So exercise, sleep, isolation, social media, and what's the fourth one that we should all be aware of?
The third one's meaningful social engagement, which is the opposite of isolation.
Okay.
And then limit your social media and limit your news, just like you would limit alcohol, right? You drink some alcohol, you feel good. You drink a little bit more, maybe you feel better. At some point, you're feeling worse with every subsequent drink. It's the same thing with anything that you overdo, social media and news being particularly addicting. So the last one, and the one that, like, you know, Mike is such an expert in and has been working with so many people like myself and your company with, has to do with setting goals. So we're here in January, and you know, it's New Year's resolution time, and I don't remember the statistics, but usually within several weeks, January, most people's New Year's resolutions have failed and they've given up on them. And so it's extremely important for people to set goals, especially goals that provide you with optimism, which is hope, right? For us to have something to look forward to be incentivized, greatly improves the chances of us following through with behavior change. For example, like, you want to start an exercise routine, it's not as easy as just saying, I'm going to start on January 1st. You have to have a plan. And that plan involves setting goals, and those goals have to be like written down and structured so that you know, during your periods where you're struggling, you can say, okay, these are the reasons why I need to do these things, and then how you're going to go about doing them are very important. The problem is that people, they set gigantic goals, ones that are extremely hard to incorporate into a busy life, you know. And so Mike and I were going to talk about a little bit on, like, well, what improves the probability of succeeding. So first of all, writing them down and making them realistic in size and scope is very, very important. And goals have to be important to your values. Like these are things you really, really have to want for yourself. Either changing behaviors that you find to be unhealthy, or adding new behaviors on which are healthy. Those tend to be the types of goals that people want the most, that are consistent with their values. So one of the tricks is set one goal at a time, and make that one goal, you know, small enough in size that it's achievable, so that, you know, you don't just get overwhelmed when it's not working out and say, this is never going to happen. Tell other people about what your change is going to be. So what we like to do is we like to basically enlist sort of support, but also be held accountable by family members and friends and employers. You say, this is the year that I'm going to do this one thing. And if you start with one, by the way, then you can add another one later on and add another one later on, because when you get small wins and you add them together, you get, you know, changes, which is what we're always trying to move my patients towards, right? Recovering from an addiction seems like the most overwhelming thing in the world, but if we break it down into small little pieces and get small wins, then we can start piecing them together and make real change. And this is for people.
Would you encourage people to, you know, losing weight always seems to be on everybody's top of the list, and when you break it down, would you encourage people to break it down of, say they want to lose 20 pounds, that they want to lose 5 pounds, or would you make it more behavioral based and that they're going to exercise 5 days a week? Would it be more behavior based, or just a smaller bite size?
So the way I would handle that is, I would say, why do you want to lose weight? And get them to articulate to me exactly why it's important for them to lose weight. I want more energy. I want to feel better. I want to like the way I look better. Great. So let's write those down. And then we go about talking about, well, what are the things that we can do to improve the likelihood of each of those things happening? And I would certainly not get fixated on a number. I would say if you lost 1 pound, you've succeeded. Okay. and then you can go ahead and lose another pound. Because the opposite of that is to gain a pound, right? So with my patients, you know, if they show up in my clinic and they're not doing some of the things we talked about doing, but they haven't relapsed either, that's a victory, right? Yeah, you haven't made positive change in the direction you wanted, but you're also not using drugs. Or you're not, or maybe you're using drugs, but not the main drug of choice that you came here to be treated for. You know, and when we're talking about opiates, that's incredibly deadly. So we celebrate whatever victories we can get. And, you know, I constantly tell people that you know, between starting anything, whether it's changing a behavior or stopping your addiction, to being in recovery is never a straight line. You're absolutely going to have setbacks. You're going to slip. You're going to feel unmotivated, and that's fine. That's normal. That's part of being a human. And you need to accept that. And that's when you enlist these folks that you told about your goal. You say, hey, I'm not doing well. I'm backsliding. I gained a pound. I relapsed. Help me get back on track. And that's how you get success. A little bit at a time, connected over long periods of time, you get real change.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We have a couple minutes left for if anybody has questions. While we're waiting for anybody to type in, you know, any recommendations for employers out there if they're seeing signs that their employees are beginning to isolate, beginning to maybe a dip in productivity or the quality of their work, what would you say to employers to do to help their employees out?
I would basically encourage them to ask them if there's anything wrong and if there's anything they can do to help them.
Okay.
And it's hard for a very busy employer, you know, to think in those terms that like, wow, you know, this could be potentially a can of worms. But that is the first step. You know, and by showing that you care, and sort of meeting your employee where they're at, and sort of having a connection there, that begins a discourse where then you can plug them into, you know, resources that can hopefully stop whatever's going on or slow it down and get them turned around and hopefully help them.
All right, great. And here we have another question. I think this might have been regarding the getting some good sleep hygiene in. If you're reading a book, which should be relaxing, is on an app versus an actual book, does it matter if you change the screen light?
Yes.
Is there, okay.
Yeah, you either going to wear blue blocking glasses, or you're going to set the setting on your computer to not emit blue light.
All right, excellent.
And does when you do that, it's okay then to be reading at night, like on a, you know, an iPad or an Amazon device, as long as it's not emitting blue light.
Okay, and at that point, does it matter then if it's a book or an actual book or a device?
No, I don't think so. I mean, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Kindles, I mean, Kindles are so ubiquitous, and I believe they have built-in blue light blocking features.
All right, excellent. Well, it's 5 o'clock. This has been awesome. You have given a great presentation. We've adapted well, I feel like, for our changes in the seminar today. And I appreciate your time. Thank you to everybody who has joined us today. I hope you've learned something from it. I know I certainly have. And I look forward to our next one.
Yeah, thank you everybody for your time. Thank you, Jennifer. And we'll have to get Mike next time sorted out.
Definitely. Thanks again. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.